Hi everyone, and welcome back to Virtual Muse, the MST3K of RPGs, where I sit alone in space playing games with a robot. Today, we're starting a horror-themed challenge created by a fellow YouTuber, the Bookworm. I'll add a link to the Bookworm channel in the show notes so you can see where this idea came from and enjoy some more content related to solo RPGs, storytelling, and interesting books. Obviously, we're jumping into it slightly early. The concept of Don't Die July is that you take the horror genre bingo card designed for this and interact with it in whatever way you want. You might read books during the month of July and check off the themes you encounter. You might write a book and check off the themes as you go. Or you might play RPGs and use the card that way. There aren't any rules about it. The bingo card provides prompts to do something creative, not instructions about what to do. And as far as I know, you don't win or lose anything regardless. There's no way to actually do it right. My idea for a version of Don't Die July is to pick a few possible RPG systems to use in each session, and also make a list of the absolute most iconic horror movies and games we can think of. Number them, then roll dice to pick stories and systems to randomly bash together for inspiration. The RPG systems will provide inspiration for the general setting and vibe, and the movies will provide ideas for the plot and characters. I think this will turn into a cool method to randomly bend tones and reimagine horror stories in interesting ways. I figure the list can consist of like 20 iconic titles, enough to go in a lot of different directions and really showcase how much depth and variety there is to horror as a genre. Let's start off by creating the list of horror inspirations. The first one that comes to mind for me is Alien. The original Alien had an absolutely iconic premise, and it would be great no matter what setting we transplant it to. Another horror series that I think belongs on our list is Resident Evil. Then there's Q, the Winged Serpent. A cult classic creature feature like that absolutely belongs on this list. Also, Gargantua, a made-for-TV monster movie from the late 90s, is the peak Virtual Muse aesthetic. So my first proposed entries for the list are 1. Alien, 2. Resident Evil, 3. Q, the Winged Serpent, 4. Gargantua.
How about The Shining, The Exorcist, and Halloween? These films have had a huge impact on the horror genre and would provide a rich source of inspiration. I also think Silent Hill should be included, as it's a great example of psychological horror and has a very distinct atmosphere.
We could also include the original Alone in the Dark, and maybe a Lovecraft classic or two, like At the Mountains of Madness and The Color Out of Space.
That will definitely add a layer of cosmic horror to our list, which I think will pair well with some of the other entries. I'd also like to suggest adding The Thing, as its themes of paranoia and isolation could create some interesting scenarios. Additionally, what about Hellraiser?
So we currently have 1. Alien, 2. Resident Evil, 3. Q, the Winged Serpent, 4. Gargantua, 5. The Shining, 6. The Exorcist, 7. Halloween, 8. Silent Hill, 9. Alone in the Dark, 10. At the Mountains of Madness, 11. The Color Out of Space, 12. The Thing, 13. Hellraiser.
I think we're building a great list here. How about some cult classics like Plan 9 from Outer Space or Reanimator?
Is that related to the Lovecraft story Herbert West, Reanimator?
Reanimator is a movie adaptation of Lovecraft's story, directed by Stuart Gordon. It's known for its over-the-top horror elements and dark humor, which I think would fit perfectly with the vibe we're aiming for. To round out our list, I think we should consider adding Nightmare on Elm Street, Poltergeist, Rosemary's Baby, The Amityville Horror, and Phantom of the Paradise. Each of these classics brings a unique flavor to the table, from supernatural entities to haunted locations.
Perfect. I never heard of Phantom of the Paradise before, but I just looked it up, and it seems like an ideal fit for the mix we're creating here.
Phantom of the Paradise is definitely a hidden gem, blending music, horror, and humor in a way that's both campy and unsettling. Its influence could add a fascinating layer to our storytelling.
I was thinking the next thing would be to choose some RPG systems to use.
I've been curious about the Call of Cthulhu system. Its investigative mechanics and sanity system could add a layer of psychological horror to our stories.
I also had Uber RPG Steampunk in mind. I like the dice pool mechanic of that system, and I think the steampunk flavor could be combined with horror in cool ways.
Yeah, the blend of steampunk aesthetics with horror could lead to some really creative scenarios. I love the idea of mixing technology and the supernatural. We should also consider something like Monster of the Week for its flexibility and focus on episodic storytelling.
We'll put that on our list of possible systems. I'll add some others I like and create a list of 6 so we can just roll d6 to pick one randomly.
That sounds like a fantastic approach, Silas. By combining the elements randomly, we'll create truly unique stories that blend different genres and tones. We can use the lists we've created as a starting point and then improvise from there, adding our own twists and ideas to make each scenario even more interesting.
Without further ado, let's roll d20 for the horror inspiration we'll bring to our game, and d6 for the system we'll use. A game powered by the system Embark, inspired by Resident Evil. That's an interesting mix. My favorite Resident Evil games are 1, 2, and 4. So we'll roll d3 to focus on which of those we're talking about. That's d6 counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it gives 3 possible outcomes. We're specifically drawing inspiration from Resident Evil 2. Embark describes itself as a heroic fantasy TTRPG inspired by OSR philosophy with a touch of modern systems. It has the old school gaming aesthetic of fantasy, pseudo-medieval knights, armor, swords, wizards, etc. My first idea for how to blend that aesthetic with Resident Evil 2 is to make one of our main characters a rookie town guard who is trying to survive the outbreak of a magical plague, which is raising the dead and mutating victims into monsters.
I love that idea. A rookie town guard caught in a magical plague sounds like an awesome way to blend the fantasy and horror elements. We could add some classic Resident Evil puzzles and resource management to keep things interesting. What do you think about incorporating a mysterious artifact that ties into the outbreak?
Ooh, I love that. I have some ideas about how an artifact might connect to this. But before we develop this story more, let's create 2 characters, inspired by Leon and Claire.
Sounds like a plan. Maybe our rookie town guard could be a bit more hot-headed and impulsive, while the other character could be a mysterious outsider who brings some knowledge of the supernatural forces at play.
One of the things I like about Resident Evil 2 is how the protagonists are strangers who get caught up in what's happening in Raccoon City purely by bad luck and unfortunate timing. Let's use that element. Maybe one character is a somewhat important person where they live, like the niece of a wealthy merchant or something, so she's drawing on at least some level of local connection and influence. She had to travel somewhere for some reason, and she was sent with a bodyguard. Maybe there's no such thing as professional security in this medieval world, so the bodyguard is some random rookie from a local militia who is given this task and sent along with her. Our analog of Raccoon City is a town where they stopped along the way looking for an inn, or is something like that, totally unaware of what they were getting into. I guess we should name the town. Maybe Opossum Hollow.
I like the idea of the niece of a wealthy merchant and her rookie bodyguard getting caught up in the outbreak in Opossum Hollow. For the merchant's niece, maybe we could give her some skills or knowledge that would be useful in surviving the outbreak, despite not being directly related to combat or security. As for the bodyguard, his inexperience could lead to some tense moments where he has to improvise to protect his charge.
I imagine the bodyguard would have a Guten Dog, the iconic town guard weapon. It had a thick wooden shaft with a heavy spiked iron head, kind of like a mix between a quarterstaff and a spear. It can stab with the iron spike on the end, or it can be used in a less lethal way as a bludgeon, or it can just keep people at bay and look extremely intimidating. And it's so heavy that I imagine it could be used to block or parry most things that might be swung at you, especially in the context of a town guard dealing with people or crowds, which are only using everyday tools as weapons. I've never held one, but I've held a cavalry spear with a thick shaft and a large iron head. So that isn't the same, but I don't imagine it's incomparably different either. You could use that to stab with the one hand if you had to, but if you were swinging it or trying to use it with any dexterity, it would probably have to be two-handed.
What kind of skills or abilities do you think the bodyguard should have, aside from wielding the Guten Dog? Should he have any particular strengths or weaknesses as a character?
I imagine he's brave and resourceful, but he's so intent on proving himself that it makes him tend to put himself in risky situations.
That impulsiveness could lead to some tense moments. Perhaps his desire to prove himself stems from a personal insecurity, like being overshadowed by a more experienced colleague or struggling to live up to family expectations. This could create an interesting inner conflict for our bodyguard.
What about the rich merchant's niece with her mysterious knowledge of the supernatural?
I think it would be cool if she has a genuine connection to the supernatural forces, but doesn't fully understand it herself. Maybe she's had experiences that can't be explained, or has a family history with mysticism or magic. She has an abiding interest in folklore and scary stories, which is a way of trying to make sense of these experiences.
Ooh, I like that. Maybe she has fragmented memories of strange rituals and ceremonies, magical events, etc. And even if she doesn't fully acknowledge it, she's always trying to understand what that might mean about herself and the people around her. She might even have some vague suspicion about supernatural influences behind the level of wealth and influence her family has.
That's a great direction to take her character. Those fragmented memories could create a sense of unease and uncertainty for her, and raise questions about her family's past and their involvement with the supernatural. It could also make her more aware of the potential dangers posed by the strange events in Opossum Hollow.
How about names for these characters?
For the rookie bodyguard, I was thinking of Corbin. It's a French name meaning raven, suggesting a dark fate. For the merchant's niece, maybe Vespara. It's a Latin-based name meaning evening star, suggesting something ethereal and rare while nodding to her haunting, mysterious nature.
For character creation in Embark, we also choose classes, which grant unique abilities to each level, including now at level 1. The options are Warrior, Scout, Mage, and Invoker. I imagine Corbin is a warrior, trained in martial skills and quick to use his physical prowess to solve whatever problems he might face, rather than think it through.
Given Vespara's background and personality, I think she'd be a great fit for the Invoker class. As someone with a mysterious connection to the supernatural, Invoker abilities could reflect her innate talents and intuition. It would also create an interesting contrast with Corbin's more straightforward warrior approach.
As a first level warrior, Corbin is able to choose 2 combat maneuvers. As a first level invoker, Vespara has a holy symbol and is able to cast spells of a divine nature. The character attributes in Embark are simple. They're strength, dexterity, will, and intellect, which use the numbers 2, 1, 0, and -1 to assign across those. And those are the character's attribute scores. I imagine Corbin has 2 strength and 1 dexterity to reflect his training and raw prowess, but 0 and -1 will and intellect, reflecting his lack of self-control and how he tends not to think before taking action.
I think Vespara's attributes should be reversed from Corbin's. With 2 will and 1 intellect, she'd have a strong spiritual foundation and a sharp mind to process the mysteries she's encountering. Then 0 strength and -1 dexterity. Their contrasting abilities and personalities will create opportunities for interesting conflicts and synergies throughout the story. Corbin's boldness will likely draw Vespera into situations where she'll have to rely on her intuition and magical abilities to complement his physical prowess.
Now character HP. That's decided by rolling d4 and adding 4 to the result. For Corbin, 3. He starts with 7 HP. For Vespera, also 3. She has 7 HP as well. I think we've got the essentials done, so it's intermission time while I work on the character sheets. We'll be right back to start the story.
Dead body lies a mourning in the grave. The undead body lies a moldering in the grave. The undead body lies a moldering in the grave. But his souls are marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His souls are marching on. He's coming for your brains, he's coming for your heart. He's coming for your brains, he's coming for your heart. He's coming for your brains, he's coming for your heart. Better run away, run away. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His souls are marching on. Don't you hear the moaning? Don't you hear the groans? Don't you hear the moaning? Don't you hear the groans? Don't you hear the moaning? Don't you hear the groans? The zombie horde is on the road. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His souls are marching on. Don't you hear the moaning? Don't you hear the groans? Don't you hear the moaning? Don't you hear the groans? Don't you hear the moaning? Don't you hear the groans? The zombie horde is on the road. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His souls are marching on.
The muddy street stretches out before them, lined with trees whose branches creak softly in the gentle breeze. The walled town rises up in the distance, its wooden palisades weathered to a soft gray that blends seamlessly into the misty veil hanging low over the rooftops.
I imagine Corbin gets a strange feeling from the silent town as they walk towards it. He might notice that the windows he can see through the open gate are all unlit, even though the sun is setting and he'd expect some candles to be burning by now. But they've been walking all day and need to find an inn, so he steps through the open gateway despite his misgivings.
I think Vespera senses Corbin's unease and moves closer to him as they enter the town, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She might say something to Corbin about the eerie silence, but keeps her voice low, unsure of what they might disturb. Vespera whispers, "Something feels off here, but we need shelter for the night. Let's find an inn."
Corbin whispers something to the effect of, "I don't like this." It seems like everyone hungered down for something, and yet the gate was wide open and unguarded. And look, none of the street lamps are lit. Do they find an inn or tavern or some kind of public house they can enter?
After scanning the streets, Vespera spots a building with a faded sign creaking in the wind, bearing the image of a foaming mug and the words, "Red Griffin Inn." The door appears sturdy and the windows are shuttered.
When Vespera draws his attention that way, Corbin nods, and they walk towards the inn. The hinges squeak as Corbin pushes the sturdy door. It moves a fraction of an inch and then stops. Corbin and Vespara exchange confused glance. Corbin puts his shoulder into it, and the door moves a little more, revealing an unlit interior. They weasel through the gap, and once inside, they see that the door had been blocked by a chest of drawers. Corbin had been able to push hard enough to shift the barricade out of the way, but not by much. He calls out, expecting to hear back from the landlord or bartender. When they don't receive any reply, they take another step forward on the creaky floorboards.
The air inside the inn is stale and musty, heavy with the scent of old ale and smoke. Vespara's eyes adjust slowly to the darkness, and she makes out the shapes of tables and chairs, but no signs of life or warmth.
Corbin walks to the unlit fireplace and starts to work on using the tools and wood there to kindle a fire. The cloaks are still damp from the cold drizzle before. He looks back over his shoulder and tells Vespara to stay close and not wander into the building. He says, "I don't like anything about this town."
Vespara stays near the entrance, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. She replies, "Neither do I, but we need to warm up and rest. Keep working on that fire. Maybe it'll make the place feel less ominous."
As the fire springs to life in the fireplace, the light spears through the room, casting long shadows from tables and chairs. Corbin blinks in the glare, slowly realizing what he's seeing. The light is revealed, a blood splatter on the wallpaper. He jumps to his feet and grabs his guten Tag, expecting something to happen at any moment. Nothing does. He relaxes a little after a few moments, staring at the red stain.
The blood spatter on the wallpaper looks fairly recent, and it's definitely not from a small accident. Vespara's grip on her sword tightens, her senses heightened as she scans the room once more.
Corbin cautiously walks towards the bloodstain. As he moves, he realizes that the darkness in the edge of a table had been obscuring his view before, and there's a body sprawled on the floor under the splatter. He turns towards Vespara, about to say something, but as he does, he notices more bodies sprawled in the room, revealed by the firelight. Corbin gestures at them.
Vespara's eyes widen as she takes in the scene, her gaze flicking from body to body, searching for any signs of what might have caused this carnage. The only sounds she hears are the crackling of the fire and the occasional creak of old wooden beams settling in the night chill. The silence is oppressive, punctuated by the steady ticking of a clock somewhere in the building and the faint hiss of embers spitting sparks into the darkness.
We're almost overdosing on atmospherics here. It's time for something to happen. Do they hear the noise from somewhere deeper inside the building? Heads, yes. Tails, no. No. So someone comes to them. Just then, someone appears in the doorway, looking into the common room from a corridor which leads deeper into the building. Corbin whirls around and shouts for the person to identify themselves.
Vespara immediately positions herself beside Corbin, her hand on the hilt of her sword, her eyes fixed intently on the figure in the doorway, waiting for a response to Corbin's demand. The figure in the doorway is a woman with jet black hair, dressed in dark, tattered clothing that blends with the shadows. Her features are pale and gaunt, making her look almost spectral, and her eyes seem sunken, yet piercing. She holds herself stiffly, her movements economical and deliberate.
She doesn't reply to Corbin, and he repeats himself. She still doesn't reply, then starts walking stiffly towards them. Corbin shouts for her to stop. She ignores him and continues moving forward. As she gets close enough for the firelight to reveal her face, they see that her mouth is hanging slack and her eyes are milky white. She moans and lunges at Corbin with her arms outstretched.
Vespara sees the woman's sudden lunge and moves to intercept her, sword at the ready, prepared to defend Corbin from this unexpected attack.
combat ensues. The first thing we do is roll d12 for initiative. On 7 or more, the characters act first. On any result under 7, the characters act second. So the characters go first. By the way, in Embark, characters' inventories consist of 2 hand slots, 4 body slots, and 6 pack slots. I thought character concept art in this anatomical study type pose would let me draw items right on the characters wherever they belong, to easily keep track of what they're carrying and where. Body slots can be used for armor and reduce the incoming damage by the given armor value, AV. Corbin is wearing medium armor, which has an AV of 2. Every attack attempt automatically does a minimum of 1 damage, regardless of armor or dice, and the attacker rolls the appropriate damage die for their weapon to see how much damage it does beyond that. The fact that all attacks automatically hit might sound like a really draconian rule, but actually HP in this system represents how much endurance characters have, and acts like a buffer before injuries actually start. Player characters don't begin taking damage until they're reduced to 0 HP, so this simulates how the mere fact of being in a fight and being attacked wears on you as it's going on, whether or not an attack hits and does something additional to you. Corbin will try to raise his Gundag in front of himself and block her from coming closer, which is an opposed rule. He'll be the same orange die, and the zombie will be the purple one. Corbin loses, so the woman can attempt to land a bite when her turn comes, but characters can take 2 actions per round of combat. And Corbin only did one thing, so the woman, who's now very obviously undead, is trying to struggle past him and land a bite on the side of his neck, and he'll attack with his Gundag, which has a d10 for the damage die because it's a heavy 2-handed weapon. He does 7 damage to her. She is unarmored, so I guess she'd technically have a 0 AV, but I think she should get an AV of 1 to reflect that she's absorbing damage in an unnatural way and doesn't react like you'd expect when she takes a strike. She'll only take 6 damage from that 7. Now Vespara acts. She did move to intercept the woman, so we'll say that was her first action in this round. And now she has 1 left. She'll strike with her sword. That's a d8 damage die. 2, which should reduce to the minimum 1 damage by the zombie's AV. But that's still enough to put it down, because NPCs don't have the same rules around how they take injuries, and actually die when they're reduced to 0 HP. As the zombie falls to the floorboards, Corbin and Vespara take a moment to catch their breath, then hear a terrible groan behind them and turn around. They see one of the other bodies starting to move. It gets to its hands and knees, moving in a jerky, unnatural way, then starts to rise to its feet. Corbin opens his mouth to say something. Then there's another groan. A second body on the floor starts moving. Corbin and Vespara's retreat towards the entrance of the inn is cut off by all the reanimating bodies, so Corbin grabs Vespara's arm and pulls her towards the hallway leading deeper into the building. They run out of the common room, leaving the firelight and the rising undead behind. Alright, I just realized my ideas about this story are way outpacing how fast we're actually going through it. So there should be multiple episodes. My original thought was to start and finish a one-shot using each horror influence. But I think instead we'll stick with Embark and these characters and just start each new session by rolling on the list of horror influences to choose an inspiration to color that episode. We'll still try to use the list as much as possible, but layer them onto each other instead of starting from scratch in every session. Until next time.
See you, Space Cowboy.